everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, doing a solo bonus episode, but I won't be solo for long, don't worry. But anyway, for new listeners, this is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research. Every week, we pick a topic and we discuss relevant research, but sometimes we like to do something a little different, and that's where these bonus episodes come in. In case you did not know or hadn't heard, I certainly hope you have, but hey, there's a lot of us out there, I guess, nowadays. Black Applied Behavior Analyst Group recently had their very first, or their inaugural conference. It was a virtual conference due to the kind of the winding down of the pandemic, but that was back on Juneteenth, and it was their first conference. We were very excited to be able to be sponsors to the conference. We were able to send, a few students as well to the conference. And we are also very fortunate in that two of the conference organizers, our chief organizer, Adrienne Bradley, as well as her colleague, Dr. Danielle Beale, were able to free themselves up from already planning for the second conference to talk with us about the process of developing the BABA conference, things they learned about the conference, plans for the future, as well as some of the highlights of the conference. So if you weren't able to attend, or even if you were able to attend and wanted to hear a little bit more about how the conference came about and some of those nitty-gritty details that might not, come up with the speakers you got to see, please do listen and enjoy. They were so generous with their time, and I was very excited to hear so many great, anecdotes and tidbits about the creation of this inaugural conference, the inaugural BABA conference. So please listen and enjoy. All right, so I am joined by Adrienne Bradley and Dr. Danielle Beale, fresh on the heels of the inaugural BABA conference. Adrienne, Danielle, thank you so much for taking time after I'm sure you're exhausted and probably want a break from BABA discussions for a little bit to talk even more about, the conference and the experience that I'm sure has been taking up a fun but a significant portion of your free time over the past year or so.
Yeah. A lot of people say, I'm sure you're on a BABA break. And I'm like, that week after we were looking at venues for next year. So we haven't taken a break.
No,
oh, okay.
There's
I'm
no
sorry.
break to be had.
Yeah, there's no breaks. But I love to have a space to just recap, and next year, we will be taking a break. But thank you so much for allowing us to, come on the show and sharing our story with this conference.
So I guess let's just start with a nice big open-ended question. What was the genesis of the BABA conference and how did it all begin? I think, Adrienne, you and I talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, but for any new listeners, like where did the idea for the BABA conference come from and how did it all get started?
Yeah, the conference idea really came from the fact that as a collective community in the Black community, we had not had a space for us to be community. We had not had a space where you saw multiple different Black people presenting or in attendance of a conference and being able to network in a larger scale. And so BABA was like, let's do it, and I think that's kind of our attitude towards everything is, if we don't see it, create it, and let's double down on that for our community. Would you say, Danielle?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things that, because I came into BABA a little bit right after they started conference planning and assisting with the conference, but over the course of my 2 decades in the field, I had been going to CalABA because that was kind of what I had access to early in my profession and was oftentimes left with feeling like there was a huge disparity, but not really knowing what to do about it. And so as soon as I heard that this was kind of occurring, I felt just even as an attendee that this was a much, much needed space as, a Black clinician to really navigate, like Adrienne said, network, and really just gain access to information that was going to be specific to me as a clinician and the individuals who I serve in the field.
In that regard, from the conference portions I was able to attend, it did seem like that initial mission of having a space came off, I want to say without a hitch. I'm sure you're going to tell me, no, plenty of hitches because we're planning an inaugural conference.
Oh, Rob. Yes.
To be a fly on the wall of conference planning.
Yes. Funny, I'll drop my first story. So Danielle was here in Detroit with me and a couple other of the BABA attendees. And my nerves were through the roof. My anxiety was just there, right? And I'm getting my PowerPoint together, get my speech together. 5 minutes before I'm supposed to get on to talk to almost 600 people, I lose my Powerpoint. 5 minutes before I'm supposed to go.
Wait, where'd they go? Like you printed them and they fell out, or what happened?
Rob, into the abyss of who knows where.
Technology.
Yes.
I just so happened, my partner just had walked in the door just to make sure, he works in tech, so he was coming over to make sure the Wi-Fi was good and things like that. And he was just sitting next to me, and I was like, you got to be effing kidding me. I was like, Danyelle, I lost my PowerPoint. I'm supposed to talk in 5 minutes. My friend Sheena was over, and she was like, can I get you anything? I said, you'll know when you open that refrigerator what I need right now. And so I'm trying to whip up a PowerPoint and a speech in 5 minutes. So when you say, it looks just so seamless. That's the first story of just things that can happen,
That's how we kicked off the inaugural BABA conference.
Right.
Okay, but nobody knew. I mean, were people typing in the chat what's up with this speech? Feels like it was written 5 minutes ago or anything I'm sure. No. I didn't notice anything.
No, but one of the things that was kind of a phrase throughout the conference is I like to say that we whip things into a ponytail, and that's just a cultural term that we use. And so behind the scenes, Adrienne and the rest of us, as we supported her, were tasked with whipping her presentation into a ponytail so that when she got on camera, no one knew, the difference. So,
Oh boy. Oh, fun. That sounds, I mean, it sounds like it was about, the deep breath and then, okay, what do I got? What can I put together?
Let's whip it in a ponytail. Let's get it done.
A deep breath, a morning drink, and let's whip it.
I mean, that's the pro of the virtual conference though, right? Most of the time, who knows what you're doing when you're not on camera?
No, but no, I wasn't taking shots or anything like that. But man, I was like, you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah.
So when it came time to plan for the conference, some of the planning had started a little earlier than start of pandemic, or was it sort of all around the same time? I'm trying to think back to the last time, way back when we were first talking and hearing about it. And so what was that component like? Just, hey, we got to do the first one of these. Hey, let's do it in a historical time frame that never happened before. So should be fun, right?
Right. Originally we were supposed to have this conference in October of 2020, I believe. We were supposed to have this conference previously, but then pandemic planning, we had to cancel it. So I believe it was October 2019. The last year is a blur, really. We're in 2021, but I'm still trying to get over, did I skip 2020 or 2019?
Yes. Yeah.
And so with the pandemic, we canceled and things like that. And we had to shift to a completely virtual conference in February of 2020. We had planned for this to be in person, but as far as location goes and some of the pre-planning that we were doing, we wanted to bring ABA and, the community of behavior analysis to a place that people have a stereotype about. And that kind of signifies how Black clinicians have been feeling in this field, particularly. And so when you think of ABA and behavior analysis, and you think of where some of these major conferences are, you do not think of Michigan,
Right.
let alone Detroit. Michigan, right? You would probably think, oh, they're going to go to Kalamazoo, where Western Michigan is, because, that's the historical, very ABA educational system. But we wanted to bring people to a city and a place that has a bad rap, but is actually one of the most beautiful places and good energy you will ever see. And so we were just so very excited to potentially have people in person in a city like Detroit. And some of that pre-planning we were doing, we were very intentional on the businesses we were partnering with, which I think a lot of conference organizations can do a better job at. We were very intentional on the price of our conference and the hotel, and making sure that we were giving out equitable access to even get to a conference. And we were also taking a look at, we wanted to make sure that the Black Commission was affirmed throughout the entire process. And we actually put out a call for papers. The only invited speakers we had were our keynotes. So all the speakers and sessions that you guys saw were people voluntarily submitting. And we had over 70 speakers at our very first conference.
I thought the breadth of speaker topics was amazing. It's always a good feeling, albeit a little frustrating, when you're looking at the agenda and you're like, I want to do that, but I also want to do that, and I can't do both. I know the conference was recorded after the fact for a period of time, but still, it's that sense of that you don't quite get it the same from, I'm going to watch this webinar of a conference. It's never the same as I'm here at the conference. And I think that was really true with the virtual platform, that it was Whova.
Yep.
Whova.
I know I was really impressed with kind of how slick it went, how much people were engaging in chats on the sidebar while still being able to, comment to the speaker, the virtual booths and everything. It was really impressive. Like I still can't wrap my head around what these things look like.
Yeah. And, shout out to Arizona ABA, because they actually used Whova for their virtual conference last year. And I fell in love with the interactivity of it. And if we were going to be on a virtual platform, how could we still foster community, which is what our original goal was.
I mean, and you found it did, what you needed in terms of, fostering that community. I mean, did you get to participate with some of the chats? I mean, Danielle, I know you were one of the speakers, so, Danielle, maybe this is a good question for you. What could you see as a speaker? Because I saw lots of great comments in the chat. Sometimes it seemed like the hosts were able to respond to them. Sometimes they may not have been, just because, maybe they were in the midst of making a point. But what was that like for you as a speaker, with kind of all the extra sort of social components of the Whova platform?
So we were tasked, because I helped plan, we were tasked with understanding the Whova platform, months in advance, so that we were familiar the day of. And so I had accessed it from that standpoint. And then when it was time to present, and you could probably in hindsight see how flustered me and Dr. Nasia were, because we had a very complicated setup that Adrian's partner had helped set us up. So we had a laptop who was running Whova, because I was moderating other discussions at, various times throughout the day. So I was playing both roles. And so when it was time for me to speak, we had to use a completely different laptop. You didn't know this, but behind the scenes, Adrienne had to give me her laptop, because me and Dr. Nasir are both ABA aunties, which means we're elders, and we couldn't see very clearly. And so we needed another laptop to kind of see our notes. And so there was a lot going on there. I had asked the people in the house to go upstairs, because I tend to get very distracted. So I had a lot of stimuli coming at me. Dr. Nasia is the same way. So we had the Whova chat, we had the Zoom chat, we had, our picture, we had our notes, we had the presentation. So there was a lot going on as a speaker, and I had to kind of intentionally like focus my attention, just to my notes. And so I think in hindsight, when you look back at it, you'll see that we were kind of flustered. I think we did tack that in the beginning of our talk. Like, look, there's a lot going on. I think there was a mishap that happened upstairs. So I'd heard the commotion upstairs. Adrienne's laptop at one time, I couldn't get into it. And so I had to like text her to like come downstairs to like, put in her password. So that was kind of another behind the scenes story, but it was great as a speaker. I knew exactly what to do, and it was really easy to navigate. I just did not anticipate that I would be so overstimulated, trying to wear both hats and trying to make sure that, everything was in its place.
Do it all over again, or I guess you will be doing it
Yes.
all over again,
right?
in some form or another. I mean, what are your thoughts? As conference organizers, presenters, are you all for the virtual conference being the new style of conference in terms of having some additional inclusivity, maybe giving people a chance to have a voice that they might not get at the traditional conference? Or are you sort of thinking, maybe let's go back to being in person and ditch some of the extra, IT snafus that can show up?
Well, when we originally were planning our in-person conference, we had always planned to have a virtual platform for the international community. So we, from jump, were planning to be a hybrid conference because we know that our international community struggles accessing quality conferences and trainings and CEUs. And so we were going to have this whole live production and live stream that so our international community could access the content. So we will always be a hybrid conference. That was what our original intention was. And I think now with COVID, there's different platforms and ways for conference organizations to do that. So as far as, the trend for BABA, that's what it's going to be, but definitely in person for sure. Because again, going back to our original purpose for this conference is that Black practitioners, technicians, BCBAs, BCADAs, parents, professors, whoever, need a collective space in this industry to network, to grow, to foster, to see themselves. And, ultimately, who better to do that than BABA, right? And so I think we really take for granted, and Danielle, we can kind of speak to a little bit of what our energy was here. I think some people take for granted in-person conferences and their ability to go to an in-person conference that is not just your state association. And I think we also have taken for granted the fact that the majority of these people in the field are white. And so what it feels like to sit next to and be in a room of your peers. And imagine constantly going into spaces, your workspaces, the grocery store, and not being with your peers. And then add on a conference and that stigma and approach that in-person conferences have. If you were the only male, white male in every space that you came across in your life, you would understand better the importance of having an in-person collective space for this community. Not to say that other people from other communities cannot also be involved in the space. By all means, BABA is nothing but inclusive to all people. However, just imagine the impact and the unintentional impact.
And the significance, I think, like Adrienne, you hit the nail on the head. Like, Rob, if you can imagine just for a minute operating in isolation for the majority of your career, and then, having access to a conference that is specifically centering what has felt like marginalization to you, right? That's one thing. And so that's why I think when you talk about the feel of the conference, people were blown away by just being seen, from even the swag bags that, BABA had sent out
to the first,
to the first 300 people who signed up, but being there, and originally this started out as like, I'm on the board, Adrienne needed help, with conference stuff. And so I had originally just like, hey, I'll fly out and help you. That's what I do. I serve. And then it turned into, well, we have this space and a couple other people were local. Dr. Nasia, is a couple states over. And so she drove in. And as we were there meeting each other, who we'd been doing collective work with over the past year in a global pandemic, making this actually happen, meeting each other for the first time, I cannot tell you the feelings that came up and just to be able to share this space with other skilled clinicians that look like you, where I walk into a room, where Dr. Nasia walks into a room, where Adrian walks into a room, and I don't have to disclose anything. I don't have to, they see me, they know my struggles, they know my strengths, they see my value. I don't have to perform.
Right. You don't have to wear that armor.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And being in this space, with each other, and then experiencing, like, for the first keynote speaker, a Black man talking about his family and love at a science conference, Rob, like, it is overwhelmingly, to hear, I think, we were talking about some highlights, like people were quoting Tupac Shakur, and like it was unheard of, and like the images that we were seeing, and it was so culturally rich and diverse, and to be able to experience that with peers who see and know me, right? That we can all like see this image and know what it means collectively. Like there are just no words for what that felt like being in the same room. And I know a lot of people knew that we were together and had commented on like, having FOMO and missing out. And so the idea that we're going to do this again in Detroit, where so many people are going to actively put effort into making sure that they're in person, because being able to hug and touch and be in the same space and collectively just being in community was something that I think we're all thirsty for. And there is no substitute for that.
I know, Danielle, you said there are no words, and I can't imagine, that feeling that you're having, but I think you, to the best of my ability to understand, I think the way you explained it, that sounds amazing. I mean, I'm so excited that even being virtual, so much of that feeling was able to come across. Yeah.
And something else I wanted to add, it was that first morning, we were all sitting down after Adrian's partner had left, and he had set us up, and we were all in the zone, and and we had taken a group picture, and I posted it, and I'm getting emotional like even thinking about it, but the feedback we got from that picture, and seeing so many like strong, beautiful, skilled clinicians who had been discounted in so many other environments together on Juneteenth, which is a whole other like significance that I'm getting chills even just reflecting on, was so powerful. And to this day, I mean, people are still, reaching out and just, reinforcing, that image. And, a lot of people know who we are individually, but then to see us collectively, Rob, it was just, it's overwhelming. Like I keep saying I don't have words, and then I keep going on and on, but really it's like overwhelming. It's just overwhelming. The intensity, of feelings and emotions that came up, just being able to do this work with my sisters, with my community, with women who support and see me, and offer this to a community who I think are starved, and I use the word starved and thirsty for just being able to access any information that serves them specifically.
Right. The entire community has been in deprivation for years. Decades.
Years. An entire field worth of, like history, right? This field is, I don't even know, I'm bad with numbers, however old this field is, but this is the first time, this is history. This is first time that really Black clinicians are feeling heard and seen and valued in a way that I think collectively we've all felt like we haven't for all of these years.
Wow, it's so exciting that it was able to come together, to have that feeling, and now you're getting to plan the second one. Which
Yeah.
Which I mean, I don't want to jump. I usually kind of questions like, what do you think next year will bring? I like save those for the end, but I feel like it's kind of a natural seg. I mean, do you think you'll be just sort of doubling down on that feeling?
Yeah, I think that, Danielle, I think I would like for you to speak to Detroit, the city, and what you kind of felt. And then from there, that we want to just kind of amplify that. So I think, Danielle, this would be a really good question for you to answer.
Yeah, so I had never been to Detroit, and a little bit of personal history, I think I alluded to in the talk that I had, and I've shared this publicly over the past year, but I've been in the field of ABA for 23 years. I came into the field in a leadership position, so I've served as a leader in the field for a good part, for all of my career, and had met one other Black BCBA in person who I worked with for a little portion of for a couple years during my career. And so finding BABA, and I found them, really, I had become a member before the pandemic, had reached out, said I wanted to serve in some capacity, but BABA was really, I think, organizing, who they were and who they were becoming. And so I had, kind of touched hands with Adrienne and some of the other members on the team. And then as I fell in love with their mission and they aligned closely with mine, started doing more work. And so me, saying, hey, I'll come out to help. I didn't really have any idea of what I was really committing to. I just knew that Adrienne needed help and that I wanted to, again, serve in that capacity. So I went out there, not, I didn't, a little bit about Detroit. I had just come to terms with my own Blackness and who I am as a Black woman. Again, personally, I have some trauma, just the way that I was raised and how I identified. And so this year that I'd been working with Baba was just so rich and valuable to me. And so going to be with her was really important to me, like being able to help her and help kind of finalize some of the details of the conference. And when I got to Detroit, I was overwhelmed with the culture. I don't have any other word to explain except it was just rich. Like it was culturally rich. And in, this very heavy year that we've had, a lot of us want to gloss over 2020 because it was so heavy. And, coming into the city where I was able to see Black people laughing and walking down the street freely. And really everything I saw was Black. I mean, we're in the heart of Motown. And so there's murals all over the city of Aretha Franklin and Stevie Wonder and, Motown greats. And you just see Black people like happy and joyful. And for me, this has like been a theme of mine, is cultivating Black joy. And so being able to witness that, I met up with an old high school teacher that I had. He lives not far from the city, and he took me out the first night I was there. And after dinner, it was like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I just see groups of Black people, something you just don't see. I'm from California. And so that was kind of my introduction. And then to watch Adrienne, who lives in Detroit, like take me around, and everywhere she went, Rob, she was contacting people in the community, and she was like, hey, Miss Regina, and hey, Mr. So-and-so. And she had cultivated lifelong relationships with people who were happy to serve the community. And so when we talk about like community, it wasn't just getting Black clinicians together and creating this conference. So, people had information, but she was actually living in this city, doing the work, cultivating relationships, spending money to support small Black businesses that then, are going directly to the families that they're feeding and the families that they're raising. That I had never experienced in my 43 years of life. And that richness, I think, is so crucial and vital to how the people who were attending felt, right? So those swag bags that people got, we get the same feedback, is that, really a lot of people have said, I felt like this was curated just for me. And Adrienne, and a lot of the board members specifically cultivated relationships that, with these Black business owners, that when they offered their services and the things that were in the swag bag, that they were personalized and they were individualized and that they were specifically curated so that people felt like that. And that was a magic that I was so thankful that I was there to absorb that and witness that, because I think that is a part of the magic that was the BABA conference that I think that people don't understand. And those relationships are crucial, I think, to us continuing this work, specifically in Detroit. And that's how that magic, I think we want to translate into what we're going to do next year.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was long-winded, but it's so important to kind of try to conceptualize what that process was like.
Yeah. And I think, you asked us, what do we want to improve upon, or what is coming for next year? Our main goal at BABA is to use all, if not Black-owned, historically marginalized groups, own businesses. In ABA, we give the standard, here's your highlighter, here's this, here's the Post-its and things like that. And one of the things that really set us apart were the fact that pretty much, except for the Hoover app and our venue, came from a Black-owned business. We were very intentional on, okay, let's work with Plant Economy. Plant Economy is a local Detroit company who has done partnerships with Home Depot, Pepsi, Apple, the stock market. And he's a friend of mine. And I'm like, hey, let us be your first partnership. And I think when we realize when we are partnering with small Black-owned businesses, we're feeding a community. And when we realize that our dollar matters and we have to be intentional, put the money where your mouth is, these conference organizers have such a huge opportunity that they miss out on in supporting the same communities that they say they want to support. But you go to the same vendors, you got the same stuff, but you're not thinking outside of the box, right? You're not even outside of the box, because that's not even an outside of the box thought. But if you say you want to support more Black-owned businesses and you have thousands of dollars at your disposal, a conference requires thousands of dollars to be spent. And you're giving that just straight to the same white-owned majority vendors. And you're not even, that's the way that you can diversify. That's the way that you can ensure that you're feeding and supporting a community. Because that $5,000 check that we cut allowed for them to pay for a babysitting service, or go on a trip, or invest in the stock market, or, take a class and a training that they've been wanting to take for years, but didn't have the money, or allow their small business to grow. And I think the ABA field needs to do better at that, because we are a $1 million industry spending millions of dollars with majority owned businesses. And I know we haven't talked about the content, right? Like, none of this has to do with the content of our conference, but all the planning and the considerations that could be made. And I think one of the things that made us special is because, unfortunately, we are considered innovative in that sense. Unfortunately, I bet you we are the first conference to use all minority-owned businesses outside of Hoover.
I would take that bet. I agree.
Right.
I certainly haven't heard that level of description or planning in terms of supporting other groups or supporting historically underrepresented groups in terms of that level of conference planning.
Yeah. And, we had a meeting with a conference management group this week. And, one of the people on the call, and Danielle, I'm just going to say it because everybody knows me and knows I say things, basically thought that there's no way that you could have found all minority-owned businesses on this scale, but we did. And so here we are trying to partner with a conference management company, and they're not seeing our vision. They're not seeing the importance of what we say is we spend money where it is needed. And no, we are not just going to go to this fancy hotel because you guys have a good relationship with them. one of the things I asked is I went through 10 pages of their employees, and they had 4 Black individuals on a page of 20 each. So out of 200 employees, you have 4 Black individuals working for you. So then my question was, how many Black-owned companies do you have vendors for? They didn't know. And so why, if you're not able to see that vision and you just go with what is convenient, then you miss out on such a big opportunity. And I hope that our field and people listening to this just rethinks that, because it takes nothing to do an extra Google search. It takes nothing, nothing.
And really, I think the importance of this is like what I was trying to articulate in my earlier statement is the richness of how the participants felt being a part of, this conference and getting those swag boxes and having content, that related to them was being seen, right? And we're not just talking about Black individuals, but we're talking about marginalized individuals, right? And so how can we center on every single level that we're operating on? And how do we really model what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like? There are so many organizations that I think say, yes, DEI, it sounds good. And after June 2020 and this last year that we've had, it sounds, great that we're going to do this work. And I'm going to slap it on, a billboard that says this is who we are. But really, one of the things that Adrian and I, spent all day, the day after the conference, talking about in preparation for planning for next year was that what does real DEI work look like? And these are perfect examples of what that looks like. How are you cultivating relationships? Are you thinking about the people that you're serving? Are you, individualizing your approach? Or are you just slapping this label on your conference header and saying, this is who we are, or are you actually doing the work? And I think that's, the feel that you felt, Rob, and so many other, the almost 600 other individuals who, reach out and give us feedback, felt that this was, that they were seen again for the first time. And so like Adrienne said, I think if you are organizing a conference on any level, it's not just about lip service and saying, yes, this is what we're doing, but I think at this point, especially like Adrian and I and the board are really feeling like, no, you've got to walk the walk. We want to see what that actually looks like. And I think that is kind of what the difference was between this conference and so many other conferences that we've been exposed to over the past 30, 40, 50 years.
I mean, that just sounds so amazing in terms of, I think, Danielle, between your description of, being new to the community in Detroit, and Adrian, your description of, living up to the value, living up to the mission of the organization and the conference, there's this level of intimacy that I know I hear it. And even though it is, I'm white New England middle class guy. So, a lot of these things are I want to say, Jackie yells at me, I'm going to say they're new to me because guess what? You don't have to guess. I've had so much privilege and I've been able to sort of just let it gloss over me. But there's a level of just intimacy in that even from that, that outside perspective just sounds, I can't imagine that you won't see people always feeling that, as you get new people coming to the conference or year after year. I can't imagine not seeing just growth, because I think that's something that I don't want to say is lacking in other conferences, because I don't want to throw shade at any other conferences, but I don't know if it's necessarily part of their mission. It's not part of the thought process. And Adrian, you were saying it's not hard to make it part of the thought process, but some of them have gotten so big that they're like, well, we got to think about the cheap rate, or we got to think about, who we've been in business with for a long time. And it's probably somebody who knows somebody at this point. Just as someone just thinking about communities and increasingly thinking about communities, that just sounds so invigorating and exciting in terms of being able to plan and being able to just make that a cornerstone of what the second BABA conference is going to be, and the third and the fourth and the fifth, and on and on.
Yeah. One of the most exciting things for me as a conference organizer is the fact that I'm going to get to give substantial money to Black-owned businesses and innovative businesses that have never seen something like that before. And then I'm going to be able to bring that back into the ABA community and open up the ABA community's eyes you something different, right? No one would have ever thought to send plants.
But not just plants, Adrienne. Let me stop you there. Let me interject. Not just plants, like succulents, right? Which are literally designed to thrive in harsh conditions. So even the thoughtfulness behind the type of plant that was sent out. I mean, and going back to what you were saying, Rob, about, your privilege, I think that's a big issue in our field, is that so many of us operate under the privilege that we hold that we do not take time to think about marginalized communities and voices and individuals. And so where you're like, oh my gosh, this is historical and you're spearheading, it's like, well, no, Adrienne is a Black American woman living in stressful, conditions. This is her normal. This isn't, innovative. And I know it feels like that, and I don't want to discount what she's doing, but these are her actual lived experiences. And I think that's why a conference like this is so vital to so many people, not just Black Americans, but marginalized. And I keep saying that, marginalized people, because they have been so underrepresented and so underserved for so long, because people tend to just stay and operating in their privilege. And I think that needs to change in our field significantly.
I think that, Rob, I bring this football analogy. If you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. My football analogy of you could be winning, but your coach still reams you out because you're playing like crap. And that's exactly how you have to approach inclusion, diversity, and equity, right? If these organizations are just slapping a Black face or a Latinx face in their speaker lineup, but your policies or where you're having your conference doesn't allow for those who are disabled to accurately access the restroom, then you're not about the work, or if you don't have closed captions on any of your virtual or ASL on any of your talks, you can do better. If you have no marginalized own business as a major vendor, you can do better. We saw an increase in presentation diversity, but it goes way past that. It goes into your mission and what is the purpose of your conference and what audience, what population are you trying to adhere to? And I think Baba has the privilege to show up as authentically as we want to be because of, finally some acceptance that is happening in this field. But don't get me wrong, we still get racist emails. We still...
What?
Oh yeah.
Here's me going, what? Oh my goodness! I can't believe. I
can't believe that. But I do think that our table, if nothing, is authentic, and I think you saw that also in the speaker lineups and what they were presenting on and how comfortable. I keep going. Shout out to Danielle Willis, man. She stole the conference away. So shout out to her. She's an RBT out of Chicago, Illinois. And that was the other thing. We had so many non-BCBAs present on our conference, and everyone loved the content that they got. So shout out to Danielle Willis out of Chicago, because she had me cracking up and said what needed to be said.
Rob, at one point, Danyelle Willis, I'm just going to quote her because this was honestly a highlight. I think we put it in our Baba newsletter this past month. But Danyelle Willis made a statement that when talking about kind of diversity and how she navigates, this predominantly white field, she said if she's interviewing for a job and she looks at the employees and that if everyone has the same hair color, that she doesn't need those issues in their life. And it was such a profound statement. And it was such specifically so profound, and it was so on point. And she was able to articulate what so many of us have felt I mean, I was moderating her talk, and I think at one point me and Adrian like got up and like high-fived each other because we were like in the moment of like, oh my goodness. But there were so many magical gems, and just being able to like authentically show up and talk about our lived experiences was so valuable. And being able to kind of show like, this is why a conference like this is so needed, why representation matters, because again, collectively, I just think that voices were heard that were typically dismissed.
So in terms of kind of an overall conference theme, you had a call for speakers. I mean, did you find that there was a theme beyond what you kind of were expecting to see in terms of invited papers, or did a theme sort of like organically emerge in terms of, we've talked about certainly, I think some themes generally in terms of the goal of the conference, but in terms of like the types of research being discussed or the types of issues being discussed, at different levels, or anything we haven't really discussed in terms of those types of themes?
Yeah, the theme of this year's conference was diversity, equity, inclusion, but that's not theme for every conference. It was just very much so needed this year after the year, we've had and where ABA is right now. And so within that, the themes that I kind of saw a lot were microaggressions and how to identify racist acts. The rhetoric of racism talk was amazing, and applying ABA to everything. Another talk and theme that we had, the critical race theory with Tatiana Francis and Sarah Pound, was amazing, and how ABA can help push that forward, because that's such a hot topic, in the media right now. And what is it really, and why is it important for us to keep that in education? But that's a whole different conversation. And then you also saw just themes of people wanting to tell their story, of feeling deprived, of feeling undervalued. And so storytelling is very deep rooted in the Black community and our culture. And to come together, that you had Sarah Lachego and her story, you got to hear stories about Dr. Nasia and Dr. Danielle Beal. You got to, and all in one collective space. So I think those are the two things that I kind of saw pop out that I wasn't really expecting, but so glad that it kind of organically happened.
Danielle, did you see kind of similar themes pop out, or were there other themes that you noted in some of the talks you were either moderating or were able to listen to?
Yeah, no, I wholly agree. And when, the submissions were coming in from the call of papers, what is that called? Is it called to papers?
Call for papers.
Call for papers. Thank you. I get all like, way
Yeah.
down on the technicalities, but yeah, call for papers. We knew that we had a really great bunch, but like Adrienne said, some of the things tied, some of the conversations tied everything together so perfectly. One of the things I was not expecting is how ABA and almost every discussion, how it was like always tied back to ABA so perfectly. So it wasn't just like someone could sit in this talk and say, well, that's for Black people, or that's for marginalized people, or that's for those people. But really, it's like, how are we embedding this discussion in the work that we're doing as ABA clinicians, in the direct service that we're providing, in the way that we're showing up as clinicians, into the way that we're serving the families. And I think that was something I was not expecting. The other part that really I think was a highlight for me and the rest of the group that was in Detroit together was this idea that at one point, Dr. Nasia and myself were coined ABA aunties or ABA aunties.
Yes.
And do you want to talk about that, Adrienne? That was so, because
profound.
That was profound. And if you can talk about that, Adrienne, because I don't have words to
before we talk about that, though, I do want to. What's your preferred pronunciation? Is it auntie or aunties? Which way do you go?
It depends on your accent and where you're from geographically. It's ABA aunties for me, but
Dr. Nasia is ABA auntie.
Yeah, but I think it just depends on your accent.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm new at it. Everyone's an aunt up here, and I got a lot of grief for it. So when I hear auntie, I'm like, yes, that's the way to pronounce it. I'm like, very excited.
Right. No, because I'm in the Midwest, Rob. So we talk very similarly. But I think with the ABA aunties, somebody, and to this day, I don't know who did this, and I want to know who they are so bad. But we speak about the lack of representation in our field and how long it took someone like Dr. Danielle Beale to meet somebody else like them. And so you have a sector of the ABA practitioners who have never met another Black behaviorist, another Black behavior analyst to this day, up until, hopefully they came to the conference. And so you have this group who were here way before I was. I'm a fresher BCBA. A lot of people don't know I've been certified since 2018. So I'm still a baby, and I hold that proudly, very proudly. But there's a whole, and I know people hate when I use this word, there's a whole generation of BCBAs who have not been validated and who have been doing this work, right? And who don't know each other. And so the term ABA aunties speaks to their wisdom that they provide for us, right? You tell your aunt everything, more than what you're going to tell your own mom and dad, because you're not going to get in trouble with them, right? And so you feel comfortable with them. It's a safe and brave space with them. And so Dr. Messia and Dr. Danyelle just really cultivate that every time they speak. And then to get them to in the same presentation is like so profound, right? If anyone has heard Dr. Messia speak, she is just on fire, and that is her zone, right? And so I think that term just helps speak to the population that has been unseen, but has so much value and wisdom to offer new technicians and newer practitioners in our field.
Yeah. And, Dr. Messia and I, we talk weekly, and we're in close, communication with each other on a frequent basis. And we were talking about, what Auntie represents in the Black community, right? And this is an honored kind of, the next generation. It's not a grandmother. It's not, a mama, which I think both of us were thankful for. But an auntie or an auntie is someone who really is highly revered and respected and is a safe space. And so having that honor and being kind of, having that distinction and being dignified in that way, I think was a highlight for all of us. I think as, Dr. Messia was talking and she was preparing for another conference that she is the keynote at, and she was telling me kind of what her concerns were and what was coming up for her. And it had dawned on us in this conversation that it took her almost, 28 years, 30 years for someone to say, hey, there's a call for papers. You don't have to fit this box. You don't have to fit into this box to submit an application. And it dawned on us in this conversation that after 28 years, she had finally been given permission to contribute to the field that she had been so diligently serving for 30 years of her life. And for the first time, she'd been given permission to submit an application. I get emotional talking about it. I was so fired up when I was talking about this with her. And I pointed that out, and I was like, how does that feel that after almost 30 years of you serving in this field that you have, greatly contributed to, that you get an invitation to contribute in a meaningful way. And after 30 years, people are just now knowing who you are. I mean, and it was a deeply emotional, kind of moment that we had, that we got to reflect on that. But, I heard your reaction, Rob. I mean, that is intense, right? And so for the first time in 30 years of her career and 23 years that I've been serving this field diligently, to be recognized and honored and valued for what we do contribute to the field. I mean, there are no words to describe what that finally feels like, to be seen and heard on that level.
I mean, kind of on that same point, Danielle, I know you and Dr. Messia spoke about, imposter syndrome. And I was at the talk, and I always take notes at conferences because I'm kind of a big nerd that way. And so But as I was finishing my notes and I got the references on imposter syndrome, I definitely was struck by, there's a lot of context that based on my own learning history, my own experiences, I'm completely missing with the idea of imposter syndrome. The context that you and Dr. Nasia really brought to that. Do you mind sort of getting into the genesis of your talk on imposter syndrome? Was that something that you knew you wanted to bring to this conference? Was it something that the two of you had sort of been discussing and wanted to kind of put in one place? Because I know I missed as much as good as I think my notes usually are. I just realized I am missing so much, just not having this experience and just getting the chance to actually ask you directly. I'm very excited to sort of hear kind of where that came from.
Let me just start by saying shout out to Adrienne Bradley, because I had been in communication with Adrienne, Dr. Nasia had. And after some time, Adrienne was like, you need to meet Dr. Nasia. And she was telling, Dr. Nasia that she needed to meet with me. And, she made an introduction, and almost instantaneously, we shared so many similarities. I think we started meeting frequently, and we started just building a relationship with each other. She was like, a thirst that I needed quenched, and she just was a ray of sunshine. I think I said in the presentation, it was like I was, walking through a dry desert, and she just was what I needed in that moment. And so initially, we're both deeply, highly sensitive people. And so we connected on that aspect. We're both mothers. We both have 24-year-old children. We both, have served diligently in this year. We both got our BCBA certification later in our career because of biases and microaggressions and transgressions against us. And so we just had this connection from jump, and we had been describing our lived experiences and had been showing up in the same spaces, as we were learning terms, like microaggressions and imposter syndrome. And so we had been in discussion about what this felt like, and ultimately it's this concept that, I'll give you an example just to kind of maybe put this into perspective. So I am one way, kind of culturally, the way that I grew up. And because I am a product of trauma, I have had to learn defense mechanisms, right? But those mechanisms have served me in a way that protect me when I need them to. And so coming into this field, the very first kind of interaction I had with learning how to put on this mask and engaging in imposter syndrome was when I presented the only way I knew how to, and I was given the feedback that I presented as a pit bull, as a bulldog, and that it was good in one environment, but in the environment that I was in, it wasn't good. And that deeply punished, obviously, my behavior and the way that I showed up, right? And so this, as I reflect, as I learned the vocabulary for imposter syndrome and microaggressions and all these things that we've learned about these past years, I was able to reflect on this experience and how small it made me feel. And so the next time I had something to say, I really had to temper, right, the way that I wanted to present in a way that was digestible for the person who was on the other end of the communication, right? And so I learned very early on in my career that in this environment, that behavior doesn't suit me, that I have to accommodate, put on this mask so that I'm digestible to the people who are receiving me. And so in talking with Dr. Nasia, so much of our, over 2 and 3 decades of serving in this field was this exhausting, performative armor, putting on behavior so that we fit into boxes that don't fit us. And so that is really where the idea of this discussion came from. And really, I don't think that you missed so much of the content like you were saying, but that 50 minutes isn't enough time to uncover all that we needed to unpack about it, because this is deep rooted. It deeply affects. And a lot of Black people have had to kind of learn how to put on this armor, how to code switch, and it's exhausting. And so I think as you talk about missing, and not understanding the depth of it, you never would in 50 minutes. And I think it was just enough of a little teaser that people were like, oh my God, yes, I identify with this. But really, Dr. Nasia and I are working on projects where we really uncover and do deep work surrounding this, because this affects so many again, marginalized people on such a big level, because it's exhausting work to have to try to fit into these boxes that just don't fit us. And I think a part of, the issue in the field is that there's this norm and there's this privilege that says this is how you're supposed to show up. And so many of the clinicians, who are serving in our field just don't fit into that. And so that's kind of the synopsis of imposter syndrome and, the disparity that it can bring when we have to engage in it.
Oh, thank you.
Did that answer your question?
It did. It definitely did. I so appreciate that. And I also do want to say, I so appreciate, and some speakers are better than others at this. You and Dr. Nasia had a great reference list that was up on the screen long enough for me to get some more of it, because, I love a talk. I love hearing a talk. I loved the kind of the storytelling and the specificity you brought to the discussion. But I also then love at the end of a talk when it's and here are more references, and they're there and I can write them down because I'm excited. I want to learn more about, what was just said, because you're right. 50 minutes never feels like enough. Or if 50 minutes felt like enough, it probably wasn't your favorite talk of a conference, But I wanted more. So thank you for having that all there. I've got my notes. I've got it all set up for later. So
thanks for that feedback.
I have a question for you, Rob, just to kind of...
What? No, I did not agree to any questions, Adrian. I'm sorry.
You guys really should do an opposite podcast show. Tell Diana and everyone that I said, and Jackie, that you guys should do an opposite day. Somebody comes on here and interviews you guys.
Oh.
It would be a very boring show that no one wants to listen to.
Stop it. No, it wouldn't. No, imposter syndrome.
Oh, I know. I think my joke is do you think society and behavior analysis is really boy, I really hope another white man has something to say.
Stop it.
Can't wait.
No.
But I think it might prove useful to kind of see if you have ever had to experience imposter syndrome. And it might be, kind of a nice deep dive to kind of see if this is something that you have experienced.
Because you're currently doing it right now.
Yeah.
I know. But I think, and the reason I wanted to ask about context is because, in hearing you both talk about your own experiences, both, talking today, hearing at the conference, and other times we've spoken, there's a context of you are a Black behavior analyst and you may have never met another Black behavior analyst. And you're getting feedback from people who were brought up in a society that, put, whiteness on a pillar. And therefore, anything that didn't match that view, well, hey, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Like you said, Danielle, that's too pit bully. You can't be that way. Whereas my imposter syndrome is going to come from a place of privilege and is going to be solely from, it's not behavior analytic language, but very internal in terms of, my own private events and my own private thoughts. And, I didn't, become the captain of the football team, or, I didn't get the grant I wanted because somebody else got. And while it's a true experience, and I'm not going to say that my own feelings of, imposter syndrome don't count or don't matter, it's also coming from a place very much of things going my way so frequently on a day-to-day basis that I know one of the things I'm trying to do, and you don't have to give me feedback right now, but feel free at any time to give me feedback, is to not assume that the place that's coming from, that feeling of imposter syndrome is coming from, is one that is based in any reality other than the one I've created in having all these chances and being excited to some extent that, isn't it nice that when I feel I'm faking it, I'm doing it under a very safe set of circumstances. So, again, not to derail us too much, but that's what my imposter syndrome. Again, I don't think it's that exciting to talk.
Well, I will give you props on that self-reflection, because not many white men in this field are self-reflecting. So if anyone is listening and needs a model, Rob just gave you one.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I think that was a brilliant model of self-reflection and kind of looking at your own privilege. I think so much of what, we're asking the ABA field to do is look at your privilege, look at your biases, and see how they show up. And that self-reflection is the very first step. And you've just modeled that perfectly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Barrett. You're so kind.
I don't get to, a lot of conference organizations don't get to hear feedback. But Rob, from your perspective, what do you think of the conference?
I really enjoyed it. I really liked the breadth of content that was available. Like I said, I don't think there was a chunk of time where I wasn't saying like, I don't know which of these do I want to go to, and some of that's because it's always hard sometimes to tell just from a title or a brief description exactly what's going to be, in the talk you're about to go to. But I really felt like I had, that embarrassment of riches, which is always a good feeling, especially for an inaugural conference, to be like, there weren't any sections where I was feeling, none of these sound good to me. Maybe this is where I go, take a lunch. So that's always exciting. In terms of the theme and the mission of the conference, in terms of feeling like a place of community, I definitely felt that was happening. And maybe it was because of the online nature of it. Maybe it was because I think so many individuals probably, and again, going off sort of the descriptions of your own feelings, sort of had a voice and could be heard. It felt, there was a joy in, you could see it in the chat. You could feel it in the chat functions that I don't get at a lot of other conferences. And so that was exciting to, again, not being something that I think about going to conferences myself, but I felt it. I felt it there. And it was exciting to get to be a part of that in my own tiny little, corner way. So I thought that was amazing. And the fact that you're going to continue looking for that feel next year, even though you'll, I don't want to jinx anything, but hopefully I'll be in person.
Right.
In Detroit is amazing. And I think is going to, in more ways than one, really make the BABA conference feel different than a lot of other conferences. And not just because it's, of your mission overall and many of the other, pieces, work that you're doing. So those are, really the senses I had. I was excited to get a chance to see topics that, tend to be, maybe they're part of a track of a conference, or we're hopefully going to get a few, people of color or people from marginalized communities. And I don't want to knock other conferences again. I don't think the goal is like, and this is like the side piece, like just so we can say we did it. But I mean, it's never going to be the focus. You're an experienced conference organizer, Adrian and Danielle. So you can say whatever you want to. I'm going to guess best intentions. I have no idea. Yes. I'm just here behind a microphone. That's all
I think a thing that came out of this, like, again, Adrian and I had a whole day to kind of reflect and kind of think about what our intentions were for the next year. And I think that was solidified in us, Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong, was that this felt right. Mm-hmm. We were affirmed, we were validated from our community that if your conference doesn't look like this, then you need to go back and think about some things. And I think that we both walked away and so many other, members of the board and the community felt like this is how you're supposed to conference. Yes. Like we just literally, we had an idea, we executed that idea, we got amazing feedback about that. And if you're feeling some sort of way about what you experienced in this conference, then that's something you need to explore within yourself. But if you're not thinking about these things on this level, then you need to re-examine kind of the way that you're putting together conferences and that inclusion part. So,
and I think it's also like, we're sitting here, Rob, the words that I heard you saying are not behavior analytic, professional, quote unquote, words that people use to describe anything in behavior analysis, like, period. Mm-hmm. And that's my favorite part. And that's what I want to cultivate year after year after year. If we aren't having that same energy, if we're not bringing that same energy, then we know we have failed. Right. Mm-hmm. But also there are pitfalls, in our speaker selection. I was just talking to Daniel Mendoza. Like, we had 70 speakers, although a majority of them were Black, which is great. I want to see an increase in our Middle Eastern representation, in our Southeast Asia representation, in our Latinx representation, in our men representation. We still have areas that we can grow in, and that we will grow in, and that we will implement change for next year. And it's not just, we'll get around to that. Like, no, I see where we had our own pitfalls and shortcomings, but definitely want to make sure people are, like, I would love if, like, using words like joy, using words like liberation and community, and not, it was, clinically good.
I don't know. Very well. Danielle and I were before we started recording, we're talking about just as a field, just as professionals in general, you should always feel that, regardless of whether it's, an inaugural conference for historically underrepresented group or just a conference that's been around since the beginning of time. There has to be a joy in this work, in the study of human behavior, because if you don't have it, like who cares? Like, I mean, psychology can come eat our lunch all day and make up new words and like repackage old, behavior analytic terminology and call it something new and write a little book about it. And, there you go. I mean, they don't need us to some extent. So we need to bring that joy. And I know, like I said, I felt it at the BABA conference. I felt that joy. And again, I felt joy at a lot of conferences, but I definitely saw it. And I'm so excited to hear that a lot of it, also stemmed from the idea of being heard for the first time. Because again, as someone who's, white male, never had a problem being heard here. So, I got my own microphone and podcast and everything too. So, it's really easy. It was so exciting to be a part of that. And I love that. I love that there's a space where all of these missions can really come together. There's the joy of the clinical precision of the terminology, but just the joy of being part of a group that loves this science and loves getting the chance to be heard. It's so sad to hear for even some seasoned aunties the first time in all this time. It was great.
That is amazing feedback, Rob. Thank you for that.
Thank
That
you
is
for that.
phenomenal. And I'm so glad that you got to experience that joy. I think, Adrian and I both, personally and professionally are talking about cultivating joy and, even in the work that we're doing as clinicians. And again, we serve under, served communities. And so the fact that you were able to, kind of be on the outskirts of that and experience, because you're not a part of the culture, but experience kind of what it feels like to be seen and heard for the first time, I think is really magical for me to hear as a part of feedback. And I think it just kind of validates, the work that we're doing and motivates us to make sure that we're growing in every area so that we can continue to support a community and really get others to embrace and be a part of the change that we're trying to create.
One other piece of feedback is, and I think this is usually, at least from my perspective, I'd like to think it is a good, measure of high quality and, exciting research storytelling and just solid research to, as well. I don't think there was a single talk that I went through. I was like, oh, okay, Jackie's going to be sending that speaker an email pretty soon about when are you coming on our show to talk about your research, or like, when is that published? Because you're coming on to talk about that research. So if the two of you don't mind, if you do get any emails of like, hey, this like Rob Perry or this Jackie McDonald or Jada Perry Cruz, they're emailing me and demanding and begging me to come on their show. Like, who are these weirdos? If you would put in a good word for us, we'd appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, because there's been such deprivation that they're not going to have a problem. I think just scheduling wise, that may be an issue, but we appreciate you guys giving them a platform because that's what we hope this did, right? That we expose other people to the research by a diverse group of individuals. And so we can no longer say, I don't know anybody talking about those things. I get 70 people, And that's what we want. And I also, I talk about this all the time, but I want people to understand the opportunities that come when you give someone a platform behind the scenes that you don't even know about, And I think, we see like just having somebody on a podcast or just talking at a conference, right? Because we've been doing it for the last, umpteen years. You still don't see the visibility that has and the importance. So I just really appreciate you guys for even reaching out to any of those individuals, because they deserve a platform and we were just the first ones, but we are charging our behavior analytic community to continue to give them a platform because BABA conference at least happens once a year. We have monthly CEUs. And we have other ways that we're going to amplify, but we need we can't be the only ones, if we want to see real change. So I just really appreciate you guys being like, oh, we got to reach out to them. That's exactly, what we wanted to hear.
I'm always a big fan of meeting new researchers and looking at new lines of research that because of, my own learning history, just, wow, didn't know that was something. Didn't know that was a thing. I'm trying very hard to get to a point in my life where I don't have to utter the phrase, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Probably going to take me a while, but I always appreciate having new perspectives and hearing new perspectives. And certainly I think, for the first conference, it was so many amazing perspectives and so many amazing topics. So I thank you both for everything you did to put that together and for having the conference. And I was so just really, really happy that I could go. And I'm really excited to come next year. I hope. I assume the dates. I can't speak to everyone because I'm the only one here. But Danielle, the way you describe Detroit, all I know about Detroit is probably from, and Adrian, you probably heard this, from the movie RoboCop, which doesn't make Detroit seem that great a place. There's robot cops all over the place. I don't know if I want to go there.
That's not the movie that.
Yes, that should be your reference. Come to Detroit, experience it in a different, more authentic way.
Yeah. No, and that's what I'm excited for. And I'm so excited that you guys are already planning to be here. We have our date, June 18th through the 20th. We're always going to be on Juneteenth. So very similar to how ABAI does, Memorial Day weekend. BABA will always be Juneteenth weekend. We do recognize that that's Father's Day, but the historical context matters more to us in our community, right? So I do hope that everyone does come in person. I think that's my own little I don't know where they're going to come, But I am so excited to see, everyone that I've just been virtually connecting with for the first time, if not sooner, then for sure June 2022. So,
well, Adrian and Danielle, it has been such a pleasure getting to talk with you both, to kind of get a chance to hear your reflections on the conference. Before we go, do you have any other than the BABA conference, the second annual BABA conference, which we have, our dates now in June 18th to the 20th, you said, right, Adrian?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there other things that you'd like people to look into? I know you're both very, prolific in a lot of ways, and everyone's got your podcasts and your writings and all sorts of ways to reach out and be in touch. So please share it all. Share it all.
Yeah, BABA membership is open right now. We welcome anyone and everyone, students, practitioners, parents, affiliates of the field, to join BABA. We have a lot of great benefits, I think. We also have Study Stock. We're gonna be announcing that. And if anyone remembers last year, we did basically a study festival for students. Mm-hmm. We like to do big things at BABA. So those are some of the main things. But, we have our monthly CEUs, and just kind of, we can't wait to share with the community what year 3 is going to bring for BABA and for our community. So thank you.
And Danyelle, anything else that you wanted to share before we wrap up?
No, you can find me at BABA, serving my heart out. I love BABA. I love my team, and I love the support that we're offering the community. And so that's where you can find me. I love that we are centering humans and human interactions above science or, these red tapes. And so, I think just check us out, and we are in need of volunteers and a lot of capacity. So if you're interested in supporting the cause, please reach out to me, and I can get you signed into a role or hooked up with an individual. We are doing a lot of restructuring and trying to offer really substantial services. And so we could use help. So if you're interested, reach out.
Huge thanks to Adrian Bradley and Dr. Danielle Beale for joining us for this bonus episode. I think originally I'd pitched it as, you can come and, we can chat for, 15, 20 minutes or so. And looking at the episode count, we went on for a lot longer. So they were so generous with their time, and they shared so much about the conference. I hope you had as much fun listening to it as much as I had listening to their responses and listening to their stories and of the process. So if you didn't get a chance to go this year, or you'd like to go again, or for the first time next year, well, like Adrian said, June 18th to the 20th will be the dates. It will, again, knock on wood, hopefully be in Detroit as well as virtually, and you can go to babainfo.org for more information. about the organization, like Adrian and Danielle were saying, if you're interested in volunteering as well. So that is the place to go, babainfo.org. We hope you enjoyed our special bonus episode of ABA Inside Track this week. If you haven't, we would love it also if you subscribe to the show so you can get all of these episodes right as they come out. You can also find us a lot of different ways. We're on social media as ABA Inside Track. You can find us online as abainsidetrack.com to find a listing of all the episodes we've done, including an episode we did from a year ago with Adrian about a discussion of research topics. You also can leave us reviews. You can leave us feedback on the website or at our email address, abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Most weeks we put out an episode, we talk about a specific topic and relevant research. So if you've never heard the show before, well, this was a fun treat, and we'll be back next week with another episode that will be a little bit more kind of back to our normal pattern. But I was just very excited to get this chance, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. But in any case, we'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.